What is going on, YouTube people? Northeast Ohio Cards and Comics here. Today, we got a good one. Friend of the channel, Gemrate, posted some incredible data late last week. If you're not following him on Instagram, I don't know what you're doing. If you're not checking out his website, I don't know what you're doing. I will link to all that stuff in the description down below. So, he posted this late last week, and it sent Facebook message groups ablaze. A blaze of people arguing. Essentially what he did was he broke down the gem rate by the three major grading companies, PSA, BGS, SGC, by era and percentage of items graded. We're going to get into a lot of this different stuff here, but the first half we're going to focus on the gem rate percentage. So this is what he put up last week, and you can see 2020s and 2010s, so basically ultra modern to modern are the two that we're most concerned about. We're going to kind of average the two together. PSA for the 10s and the 20s, 2010s, 2020s, modern to ultra modern, about 55 to 58% gem rate. BGS, 65 to 68% for ultra modern to modern gem rate. SGC, 35 to 38%. Very interesting. Very interesting. So, people looked at this and then immediately ran to their various Facebook groups and spun this whatever way that they wanted to spin it. Because once again, my general statement about this has been the numbers do not lie. The numbers are the numbers. People's assumptions about the numbers, that's where things get a little squirrely. So let's think about this for a second. People's initial thoughts, and I've seen this a ton of places. And one thing, let me mention this. He does mention at the bottom. So for PSA, gem rate is PSA 10. Beckett is a BGS 9.5 or greater. So this does include BGS 10s and black labels in the mix. But that's a very, very, very small percentage. Very small percentage. SGC, he does include SGC 10s and gold labels. Also a very small percentage. I don't think it's enough to swing any of this stuff crazily one way or the other. But, so when you look at the surface level data here, the initial thought is, BGS is the easiest. PSA is pretty easy. SGC, toughest graders around. Can't beat them. Here we go. And once again, I've graded with all three of these companies. My general statement, which it's been a long time since I said this, so let's refresh people's memories. All three of these companies kind of suck. They all have their issues. They all have their problems. They all have things different people like and don't like about them. It is what it is. So just keep that in mind. It's my general take on grading companies. They all kind of suck. So, is SGC really the toughest? Is BGS really the easiest? Is PSA pretty easy? Well, let's think about this for a second. My initial assumption was, I don't think actually anyone is really that much tougher or easier than another one. This data at this level, people aren't thinking about it one step further. What do I mean by that? PSA has a grading scale of PSA 9, PSA 10. There is nothing in the middle. It goes from 9 to 10. That's it. BGS 9.5 means a lot of different things. There is, because the subgrades, and the subgrades matter. There are min gems, there are true gems, there are min gem pluses, and then there are whatever the hell you have to do with a min gem plus, which is 2 9.5s, a 9, and a 10. A true gem is 4 9.5s, a true gem plus is 3 9.5s and a 10, and then a min gem is 3 9.5s and a 9. And then you obviously have your BGS 10 and your black label. Once again, I'm not throwing a bunch into that because the percentages are so small for that. It's not going to skew this chart drastically one way or the other. SGC, they appear to be the toughest. But remember, SGC has a 9.5. They have an SGC 9, they have an SGC 9.5, and they have an SGC 10. Plus, they do have an SGC gold label. Once again, I'm not putting a ton of weight behind that just because, not weight, but it's not going to swing these charts that much. So SGC 9 is considered a mint, SGC 9.5 is mint plus, and then SGC 10 is gem mint. PSA 10, theirs is gem mint. Once again, BGS 9.5 is considered gem mint, but then the community took and made up all these weird things with it. So, does this data tell us that any of these companies actually grade harder or easier? Or is it just actually indicative of the grading skills that the companies have? Remember, the graders only have available to them what is on their grading scale to use. They can't just make up their own. They have buckets that they have to put this stuff in. So SGC has more buckets to put stuff in because you have an SGC 10 and you have an SGC 9.5. That allows you to split the difference a little bit on that. So what I did, and this percentage of items by decade, we'll talk about that in the back half of this video because I do think this is very interesting data too, but we will circle back to that. Let's stick on the left-hand side of this pane for a second. And you notice as you go down throughout the years, especially the more modern stuff, it does narrow a little bit more, but also SGC's grading less in this thing. So once again, not too concerned about that. So I reached out to Gemrate and I said, my boy Gemrate, I am curious, could you potentially get me data, the same data, but for PSA 9s, BGS 9s, SGC 9.5s, and SGC 9s? And he said, Neo, I can hook you up. So what we have over here, never before seen data, exclusive to us. He's going to post this later today. He said I'd wait till after I put the video up. Here is a breakdown of the next level stuff. And this is where things get interesting. So PSA 10 and PSA 9. PSA 9 for modern to ultra modern is about 35%, 36% in 2010s, 35% in 2020s. That combines together for 93.2%, at least on the 2020s, but 90s plus percent on the PSA 9 plus PSA 10. When you come down here to Beckett, BGS 9.5s and BGS 9s. BGS 9s about 24 to 25%. BGS 9.5s about 65 to 68%, like we talked about on the previous screen. So very comparable there. And when you put those two percentages together, it comes out to about 92%, very close to PSA in anything 9 plus. So mint plus, PSA is about 93%, Beckett is about 92% on modern or ultra modern. SGC, this is where it gets intriguing. SGC 9s about 20 to 24%, give or take. SGC 9.5s 30 to 33%, 32.5% for SGC 9.5s in 2010s and 2020s. If you add the three of those together, it comes out to about 92%. So in Mint Plus, all three companies basically grade the same in Mint Plus. What I did with SGC was, because this is what I was curious about, to give a more interesting comparison between SGC and PSA, is and this is arbitrary, you could do whatever you want with this. I took SGC 9.5s, so that 32%, that 30%-ish, I split it down the middle. I took half those and put it on the 9 side, and I took the other half and added it to the 10 side, just for, chutes and ladders. When you do that, SGC 9s come out to be about 37 to 38%, give or take. So very close to, you cut this in half and you add 15% to it, that quickly puts you up to about 36 to 38%, right in line with PSA 9s. If you take that other 15-ish, 16% and add it to SGC 10s, that takes you up to about 55-ish%, depending on which decade you're looking at, which puts you right in line with PSA 10s. Very, very interesting. So, what can we draw from this? Which company grades the toughest? In my opinion, they actually grade all very, very close to each other. It just really comes down to what scale you have available to you, not so much the grader. All three of these companies are basically grading the same, in my opinion. You know, you're getting Mint Plus at about the same. You could argue that maybe actually BGS is the easiest, as crazy as that sounds, to get a gem mint, because of the fact that they have the subgrades. The subgrades allow them to play, I don't want to say faster and loose, but it just allows them a wider range of a 9.5. It all comes down to, the companies are all grading the same, essentially, is my take on this. The differences are the grading scales that they have that back them up, that give them the tools to assign their grades. PSA, it's PSA 9 and 10. They don't have a lot of options. It goes in bucket A, it goes in bucket B. SGC, it's SGC 9, a 9.5, or a 10. It gives them extra options. But when you, so the 9.5 breaks up the SGC, the mint grades, because if there's one little thing with it, they'll throw it in the 9.5 bucket. But when you split that 9.5 bucket, the data actually matches PSA perfectly. They're grading essentially the same. It's the SGC has an extra grade. There's an extra grade in the scale that PSA doesn't have. My guess is if you gave PSA a PSA 9.5, this would probably match very, very closely to each other. They don't have that, so we don't know. I just find that fascinating. And then BGS, because of the loosey-goosey nature of the 9.5, with it going anywhere from a min gem to a min gem plus and everything in between, allows them a wider range to give a BGS 9.5 to something. And you can see, like, even if you were like, well, but Neo, the BGS 10s and black labels in there, once again, a very small percentage, and you can see that the BGS 9 percentage in general is still a lot lower. That just means they're generally handing out less 9s. You know what I mean? Even if you're worried about the BGS 10s being mixed in with this data, they're still handing out less 9s than everybody else. You can see 23 and 25% compared to 36 and 35%. So really what you're seeing on the BGS data, now that I'm just kind of speaking this out loud, if you add together SGC 10s and SGC 9.5s, if you just threw all the SGC 9.5s into the SGC 10 basket, these numbers almost match. Because this would take it to, that would be 70 some percent. That's 68%. If you took these two together, that would be 65%. They match up almost perfectly. If you added SGC 9.5s to SGC 10s, if you just took all the SGC 9.5s, added them to the SGC 10s, they basically equal BGS 9.5s altogether, which makes sense because, once again, like we talked about, something in a min gem BGS 9.5 is essentially an SGC 9.5, basically. I mean, that's essentially what it is, because it's getting a 9 subgrade. That would get flagged with an SGC 9.5 right off the get. So it's just fascinating data to me. Essentially, it shows that they all grade exactly the same. Really. They're basically grading the same. So what people have been doing is basically saying SGC is the toughest grader. BGS is the easiest grader. They're not. SGC has a tougher grading scale. That's the difference. So very curious for your thoughts on this data down below. Those are the conclusions that I draw from it. They're all basically grading the same. It's which one has a tougher grading scale backing it up, or a more difficult grading scale, or an easier grading scale, which this data perfectly lays out for us. Once again, if you took the various grading scales and switched them around, but left everything else the same, if you gave PSA SGC's grading scale, I bet you these numbers look very similar. If you took BGS's grading scale and gave it to SGC, I bet you their numbers overall would come out the same way. The graders have to follow the grading scale that the company has lined out for it. And I think this data backs up that actually all three companies probably grade pretty decently. In regards, the data basically says they're all grading essentially the same. The difference is the holes that they have, the buckets that they have to take the cards and assign them to is different. And that makes a big difference in regards to the data. So when you look at it just this way, it tells one story. But when you actually break it down and then factor in the grading scales, it tells the full story, if you will. Now, another thing that I wanted to touch on kind of the back half of this video is this grading by ages. It really shows SGC's dominance in the vintage marketplace. 1950s and 60s allocate 40% of the cards in their census. BGS's is 6%, basically rounding. And then PSA's is 20%. PSA's distribution on grades and percentage graded is very much leveled out. 10, 12%, 11, 11, 13, 15, only 9 in the 2000s. You really see Beckett's dominance in the 2000s. You really do. And then the interesting part is in the 2010s, so the ultra modern, this is the opposite end. PSA's is 3.9, Beckett's is 1.4. This shows you how many cards they're really been getting lately, which is not many. And then SGC's is 7.6 because they really picked up with them having probably the easiest place to grade modern, ultra modern cards the last year. Since 2020 product has been coming out, they've been one of the few for the mid-tier to lower end stuff to go to. So that's why you're seeing that pick up quite a bit, in my opinion. So interesting data there. I don't want to spend a ton of time on that. But you do see some interesting, when you really look at it, it makes sense with what's going on in the world. BGS has basically been non-existent the last 2 years, and this data shows that, as in only 1.4% of the cards on their census are 2010 cards, which is probably, I bet you, I would love to know the percentage of actual RPAs. PSA has been more relevant, only higher end stuff going there, but still allocating 4% of their overall population report. And then SGC's is 7.6 because they're the only ones that have basically been open at reasonable grading levels. So I find that very interesting as well. So who is the toughest grader? They're all the same. Who has the toughest grading scale? Probably SGC. With then PSAs, and then BGS actually has the easiest grading scale. Now, I'm sure the black label people are going to come out of the woodwork at me, and the BGS 10 people are going to come out of the woodwork at me. Sure, but generally speaking, they are the easiest to get a 9.5 with. Even easier than PSA. Do they grade easier? No. Does SGC grade harder? No. They just have different grading scales. That's the important takeaway from this conversation. Once again, very curious for your thoughts down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Catch you guys and girls on the next one. Peace.